probably cliche, but to focus. I think it's the most powerful thing that we have had. We get 5 million new ideas every day in our personal capacity of different new other businesses we can start outside of JobJack. And then within JobJack, there's a billion opportunities. So I think just realizing that you must focus on one thing at a time. It's almost, I usually use the Capitec example. Capitec focused on the bank for 10 years. They built up 10 million users and then they activated financial products. And now they're, I think, the biggest funeral policy holder in the country. Whereas if they implemented that after 3 years, it probably would have looked different.
Welcome, builders, to How Would You Build It? The podcast that dives deep into the dynamic world of startups and product creation right here in South Africa and Africa. This show is more than just interviews. Every week, we sit down with the brilliant minds to provide a masterclass for building digital products amidst the challenges and opportunities unique to our continent. From seasoned founders to dynamic product managers, we uncover the unique stories and strategies behind some of the most innovative digital products being built. So for all the aspiring founders and product builders out there, you'll discover that each episode is a wealth of practical wisdom and local and actionable insights. Make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to our podcasts and connect with us on social media for even more content. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome, builders, to another episode of How Would You Build It? Renier, my co-host, welcome back. Good to have you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, lekker, Bobby. And we have one of my favorite startups here today.
Yeah, you do talk about them a lot. So I'm really excited to hear their story. I mean, I think we follow them on LinkedIn, always some really cool posts they put out and sharing their story of how they keep gaining some more clients. And I thought that would be a great conversation for today's our B2B strategy. And today we've got the founder of JobJack, Hein. Welcome. How are you doing today?
Bobby, thanks for the intro. No, I'm doing great. I'm excited for the chat with you and Renier. And just to emphasize, I'm one of two co-founders. So I'm half of the business. The other half is somewhere gallivanting, getting more clients.
Yeah.
Making sales. Employing the world.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. Employing the world. Hein, just to touch off, I mean, well, congratulations. So I saw recently you guys raised another round of funding. So well done on that. Any tips and tricks you can quickly share with the people that might be also going into a raising round?
Our biggest learning was to start early. We luckily did, but it took longer than expected. So the first half was actually quite quick getting the offer letter because we had good traction, but the due diligence half, but more just the contracting side of things takes time. So we just learned, luckily, that you need sufficient runway, a little bit more than what you thought, but luckily we had it, so we made it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And you mentioned that we covered today in the newsletter. We covered the book by Benjamin and Lorne, The First Kudu, and that's actually one of the learnings they said is you work out how much runway you need, and then you need to add a bit of buffer after that because it always takes longer than what you anticipated would for whatever reason. And I think if you don't do that planning, you can find yourself in quite a pickle, right?
Well, throughout the past 6 years, we've probably been 4 or 5 times at a point at the end of the month. When we didn't have enough money in the bank to pay salaries, but we made a plan, especially in the early days. That happened a lot more often and with COVID and stuff and so on. But at least it's happening less often. So good stuff.
Progress. You know, Renier, I must say, hey, for every founder that comes in and we bring up the topic of fundraising, they always talk about paying salary. So I think another takeaway for me is just how important that is. You know, the people you hire, the salaries you have to pay is going to be your biggest burn because they're not talking about, oh, I couldn't do that marketing. It was like, no, I needed to pay my people. And it seems like quite a trend that comes on this podcast, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, the bulk of, at least us being a technology startup, the bulk of our expenses by far are the salaries. So that's at the end of the day what we have to pay.
Yeah.
What we want to pay as well. I mean, we've got an amazing team. Like we usually when we sell to clients, as with the HR tech space, we say you don't build a business, you build people, and then people build a business. And we're selling it to our clients, but also applying it within the business. So at the end of the day, the JobJack pack, which is what we call it, which we brought together, is who makes up JobJack at the end of the day.
I think it's such an important point, right? Because if you think about it, predominant or large amount of you and Christian's time is going into sourcing great people, developing that people, helping them, supporting them. She's the last thing you want to do is like put them in a difficult spot that they won't be able to pay their bills. So I think it's such an important thing for any founder to just be so mindful of, make sure your employees can run. Because if they can run, they'll build your business. And I love that.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that's exactly what you said now is what we try to do. You learn every day and every week. You make mistakes and then learn how to multiply your people better. But it's not always a smooth journey. You need to go through that learning cycle the whole time to improve in that, if I can put it like that.
I think we kind of missed to actually say what JobJack does. What is JobJack? Can you give us a very quick elevator pitch? What is it exactly that you're doing? Because you're in the people game.
Yeah, no, 100%. So in short, what we do is on the one hand, we make it affordable for job seekers to be able to apply for entry-level jobs. So that's cashiers, cleaners, general workers, pickers, packers, merchandisers, jobs that don't require a qualification above matric or more than, say, 2 years of work experience. And on that side of the market, it's very expensive for job seekers to look for jobs, printing, transport, internet cost, and so forth. So we built a platform that makes it affordable. There's obviously a lot of detail involved with that, but just in summary, that's what the one half of the platform does. And in doing so, we capture job seekers' data in a structured way. And we are then able to, from an employer's perspective, give them access to a larger part of the talent pool and then automate the process through shortlisting, interview scheduling, the whole store level recruitment process. So in essence, on the employer side, equipping the store manager to more effectively run the store level recruitment process. I say store, it might be a store or a warehouse or a site, different things depending on the industry, but in essence, equipping them to do a better job. I'll maybe emphasize one part, we call it who is relevant. So in essence, the shortlisting part is actually where we've made quite a lot of progress, where we've developed psychometric assessments specifically for the South African entry-level market that really has been a game changer in identifying who is most likely to succeed in an entry-level role.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the quick summary.
So I mean, you touched on a very important point there, the cost of actually applying for a job in South Africa, right? So I just want to paint that picture a bit because the first time someone told me about this, I'm like, man, I never even thought about that. But if you live in a low income place or in a township or wherever, creating a CV is a mission. Like you need to find an internet cafe and someone there that can actually help you do it. Then you need to spend time on the internet to find places to submit this. But then you need an email address to get the contact back of the people if they want to find you, and you don't always have internet. And then you get an interview, you have to travel, you need 36 rand or whatever to go taxi fare there and back. You need to, it's a high cost for most of these people. Do you think that is one of the reasons that is preventing people from more efficiently and effectively, or even hiring more people? Because when they put out jobs, it's really hard for them to find good candidates that fit their criteria, even though the good candidates are out there. And it's just the cost and these prohibiting factors.
100%. You hit the nail on its head. So I can share two things. So on the one hand, employer only gets access to the candidates that can afford to apply for their vacancies, which in the entry-level space is a very limited part of the talent pool. So you might get 50 or 100 people that apply, where in reality, 5,000 people would have applied if they could have afforded to apply. So if the employer then gets access to a smaller part of the talent pool, they are not necessarily making the most relevant hires for the role, which leads to increased staff turnover, reduced productivity. There's lots of, obviously, a big impact it can have on the business. But what we've seen is with quite a lot of businesses, when they implement the JobJack platform and it now becomes easier to access the talent and they're better equipped to identify who is likely to succeed, then what happens is for the first 2, 3, 4 months after they've implemented JobJack, they make a lot more hires than we expected. So we, for example, would have expected maybe 30 hires a month for a client, and then they make 100 hires, 100 hires, 100 hires, and then 50, 30, 30, 30. And after investigating that, we realized that they had lots of unfilled vacancies purely because they were not able to fill those vacancies with relevant candidates. So we call it dormant jobs. There's lots of dormant jobs in South Africa sitting out there that can be filled, but because of the manual process, you mentioned people needing to go on the internet to see where to submit a CV, but for the bulk of the industry, they need to walk or take a taxi to find a box in which they can throw their paper CV. It's a really very manual out there still.
2023, come on.
Yeah, we're changing that, but still we've got a long way to go. So on both your questions, Lanier, yes.
Yeah, that's so crazy because I mean we know South Africa has this massive unemployment problem, and it's amazing what a bit of technology can actually do to this, how it can impact that. That's so cool. I love that. And I must say, in one of my books in the back here is Phil Knight's book, his story about starting Nike. And in the end, his last chapter, he talks about the lessons about building Nike. And one of the things he said, because they opened factories around the world, Mexico to China to Asia, whatever it was, the biggest thing that he found was in these countries, the biggest unemployment, the only way to do that is to help find the nation entry-level jobs. And that's how you help countries sort of get out of poverty. And so that's fascinating. I hate saying this, but we try not to be political. But I know that, for example, when Cyril came in as president, you see, he was going to start this like youth employment website and all of those things. I don't know what's happened to it, but it just shows that what you can do with technology and how it can, and the impact it can make. So awesome. It's not really a question, more of a statement.
No, it's a true statement, and it's also it's exciting what technology can do, but it's also it makes you realize that it's actually sad as well. If you now have this technology that's making jobs accessible, and then there's a single position as a cashier available, and 2,000 people apply, then yes, you've now gained access to talent, so you'll probably get the right person for the role, but 2,000 people applied for a single job as a cashier. So that's the scary other side of the coin, if I can put it like that.
No, it's true. And another thing about marketplaces, my experience at Sweep South was how many cleaners were applying on a weekly basis. It was mind-boggling. It almost was why the platform was able to run the way it was, is because there was just always supply. There was just always people looking for work. And it's crazy. It's just a dynamic. I mean, how do you think this business model that you have will work overseas if you were to expand it to another country?
It depends on the country. Just for interest sake, about last week, about 6,500 people signed up to the platform every day. So, sure. So it's insane if you have, the carrot of a job is very powerful in the South African context. But to your question, depends on the country. If it's another emerging market, we've gone live in Nairobi in Kenya. We did a proof of concept a few years ago just to test it out and ran it for about a month, placed a few vacancies. I think we added 4,000 or 5,000 job seekers to the platform. On that side. So I think in an emerging market, it'll be similar to South Africa. The number of job seekers will obviously be less, but we're learning so much in terms of the job seeker journey. So if one is able to apply those learnings in a new market, we'll be able to ramp things up quite a lot quicker. But if you think about a first world market, it's a completely different ballgame. For example, we working with Ocean Basket at the moment. They also have sites in London, and they've got big challenges in the UK when it comes to accessing talent. But there, it's a lack of available talent. So it's a different problem. Like we're so far off looking at that for now we're very much emerging market focused.
So I know a bit about the backstory of the name JobJack, and it was specifically for for gig economy back in the day, and then you pivoted to formal employment. Like, if a founder is listening to this, like maybe share some of your experiences around how that pivot took place. Like, when did you realize it's time to let go of gig economy and move over to this? Was there an aha moment, or were there practical steps that you can, look and analyze and see whether or not it's a good idea to pivot?
I think the short answer is just to listen to the clients. So I'll tell a 30-second story. For the first 6 months, I was calling wine farms, asking them if they needed once-off staff. So that was the first part of JobJack. And they often asked, but can't we assist them with permanent staff? And that kind of just, listening to the need from the end user got the thoughts going, but we were still very much focused on the gig economy. And we were starting to get some traction, not too much. But that pivot moment was a blessing in the sense that we got a meeting with the sales director at Pep Stores. Or actually, no, through the sales director at Pep Stores, we got a meeting with the local branch. We went to chat with them, and in that meeting, we realized the norm. So we didn't even know that the norm is a box of paper CVs, and we didn't realize that the whole process currently in the market is manual. And when we realized that, and we combined that with the wine farms asking us for permanent staff, we in that moment realized we needed to pivot, and it was about 6 months in we made the decision.
And this gig economy concept, I mean, let's say JobJack, everything goes as planned, you get a massive exit, you've got a nice pot of money that you want to invest, and a founder pitches you the gig economy idea, would you invest?
It will be quite not necessarily. I think it's a lot harder in South Africa, where the market is smaller than, for example, in the US, where you've got a massive market. So I actually think the challenge on the gig side, or at least at the start, was access to talent, like building up that pool of people that you can then place. Whereas now we have that pool. So for us to, in 2 or 3 years' time, to go and move back partially into the gig economy, I think will be an easier move than starting it from scratch. So I mean, we might end up back, but not at the moment. We're very focused, not for the next quite a few years, but not necessarily. It'll be I don't know. It's difficult, the gig economy.
But it's interesting because I mean, the world could move to a shared job, right? So if you look at a current entry-level job, and a lot of these people work on longer shifts, right? So let's say they want 2 12-hour shifts that works in a day, but you can split that into a 6 and a 6. So, one can look at those kind of things. So I think, shared jobs might be interesting in the future, and maybe perhaps they don't even call it shared jobs. It's just a partial employment system that takes place, on your platform.
It depends. Very possible. It'll depend on the type of job. The challenge one has is someone doesn't add value to a business from day one. So the norm that we have from engaging with clients is typically in the entry-level space about 3 months. So for a new cashier or a new cook or a general worker to really understand the business and to be able to add value takes about 3 months. So for someone to come in on a short-term basis to be a griller in a KFC is just not possible. So really, I would more say you're gonna have to find a niche where that time to add value is a lot shorter, and I think that's typically in your more skilled jobs. It sounds counterintuitive, I guess, because if it's a skilled job, you need a skill, but typically people that come to fill that role already has a skill. In the entry-level space, it takes time to add value, which makes it difficult. But probably there's still some figuring out to do, however, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating problem to solve in Africa, in South Africa specifically. And I actually get really excited by these kind of conversations because I just feel like we need more of these. And there's so much opportunity out there. There's a lot of people looking for work, and if we could grow and the multiplier starts kicking in, it really would excite me. But Hein, I'd love to pivot the conversation towards your B2B strategy, because clearly with JobJack and with this side of the game, which is the supply as such, that's the easy part. but for yourself and for most founders, regardless of the industry that they're trying to tap into, getting those sales is very difficult. So you've spoken about, phoning wine farms and getting in touch with the pep guys, whatever. But for a lot of founders out there that are trying to get that proof of concept, or to try and understand if they've got something that's worth selling, can you just tell us, or we want to dive into the B2B strategy that you've gone into, that sales. Can you just tell us about that early stage when you were phoning them around? What kind of tips could you give founders that are maybe in that same position right now?
100%. So I think just step one is persistence. In those early days, especially now that I'm able to compare it to when we now have a lot of big brands we work with, and it's I think Renier might have said, it's a lot easier for us to call a big company now, mention all of the big other companies that work with us, and get a meeting. Whereas at the start, it was all about just getting a meeting. And in the early days, it was purely persistence, and you needed to have some luck. So I mentioned calling all of those wine farms. That's literally it. Your rejection rate was super high. You maybe got 1 out of 100 hit, but you had to put in the 100 calls to get the one. And then once you got the one, to start using that case study, I can put it like that. Like you need, it becomes 10 times easier to get a meeting if you can refer to some kind of a success story. So I remember when I started diving into the KFC groups, like we were getting no traction, and then through persistence, we got our first KFC group. And with that name, we were able to then call all of the same KFC groups who said no previously, and now we could say, and this group is making use of JobJack. Then you got your second and your third and your fourth one. And then you could call all of them again, and you can now mention 4 that are using JobJack. So it's franchise groups. And now you had the 4, and now you get another thing. And so you need persistence to get the first one. Once you have the first one, you need to start using that name. We were lucky because we got into a pilot with Pep at an early stage. And I think that's maybe a trick. You mentioned all of our LinkedIn posts about clients. That helps a lot. But people don't always go read the detail underneath the post. A lot of those posts are pilot posts. So we got a pilot with the client. It's not necessarily a full rollout. No one reads that. They think JobJack has landed some big client. And literally, I'll sit in a sales meeting, and then a client is saying, we saw that you got X big client. We also want to become part of this. And they have FOMO. In reality, we just landed a 10-store pilot. They didn't go read the detail. I mean, we're not going to correct them. And in the early days, that helps a lot. Whereas now, obviously, it's actual clients rolling out and so forth. But in the early days, celebrate anything. Put a photo on LinkedIn that says, I got a meeting with this client. People won't necessarily read. So that's just the thought.
And there's some absolute gold in what you shared. So I actually want to pause on a few points, right? So I think firstly, I think most founders that I've worked with in the early days completely underestimate the amount of rejection you're going to face in order to get one meeting. Okay, you said 1 out of 100. I mean, let's talk about practically. Do you literally phone 100 people in a month, and then everybody says no, and you just go, let me phone the next guy? Is that how you did it, or were you talking about it was like 100 over a period of time? Like what was the frequency of trying to make this work?
So I remember this is 6 years ago, but I would call in batches. So you'll obviously do research on potential leads, put out a batch of say 30 leads, and then start calling. But what often happens is you learn so much by calling. Like you're going to make a fool of yourself the first 10 calls, no questions asked. But that's okay because you're going to learn so much. So I would typically not get through a batch of calls because partially into that batch of calls, there will be learnings. And then I will go and rewrite the script that I had. I will go rewrite a proposal if it's at that stage. So you're constantly improving the way that you approach. And the only way you know what to improve on is by actually speaking to the people. So not 100 one shot, because there's learnings throughout.
30 at a time. And which actually leads me to the second one. So a lot of people think you should cold email, like LinkedIn message, whatever. You guys choose phone calls, if I'm correct. Why is that? Why was that the method of choice? How did you go about it? And like, would you recommend cold calling as an outbound strategy for early stage startups in B2B space?
Yes, if you have the luxury of getting people's phone numbers, because we were targeting wine farms mostly and wedding venues and so forth, their information is easily available. So if the opportunity is there, yes, because then you get to speak to someone and you get more information from speaking to someone. Whereas now we actually don't cold call at all anymore, because the types of businesses we target are large employers, and there's not a number of a person you can necessarily call. So now LinkedIn and emails is our main channel, but at the start, because we had that opportunity, it produced the most fruit.
Love that. So basically, in a nutshell, if you don't feel like phoning 100 people over a period of 3.5 days and get rejected by 99 of them, don't start a startup.
And no, okay. 100%. I mean, you're not.
We saving hundreds of people lots of money right now with that statement.
Yeah. No, and it's something you can teach yourself. Like it's, I remember when I was a lot younger, you kind of, when you were at the beach and you wanted to go chat to the ladies, you kind of had to have a conversation with yourself 3 times over before you built up the guts to actually go up to someone. And but as December progressed, it
different kind of closing.
and it's the same with the calls. Like, you're gonna have to psych yourself up for the first 5, but it's gonna become easier. Like you really cross a barrier at some stage.
And I suppose the more you do it, the better you know your story, the better you get at the better you get at selling it, right? So you practice and you get that out of your mouth.
We've got something we call the JobJack narrative. It took years to formulate a narrative that actually is very solid. Probably only after 5 years we had a narrative that really makes sense. And that is your whole story in essence. And our narrative now is probably an hour and a half long.
Really?
So because we solving big challenges for large employers, so you need time. But refining that narrative is key to everything. And everyone in the business must understand that narrative. It's actually a project of mine at the moment, is to figure out how to ensure not only the sales team, but every single person in the business understands what the narrative is, because it flows through to everything.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I think a lot of companies talk about their values, and I suppose it's very similar, right? The values that you hold, the values you're trying to kind of bring to your clients. So yeah, narrative, values, and if everyone understands it, because everyone talks the same language, because every person that works for you, when they walk out the door, they're saying their narrative, they're repeating it. I love that. Absolutely love that. So a more practical, not inspiring question, but a more practical question. So CRMs, especially for a new company that, is tight on budget, how did you manage when you were doing, was it just an Excel sheet, or how did you manage your CRM, and when did you move to using something a little bit more robust?
At the start, it was Excel. So early days, I mean, you don't yet know what you're doing, so don't spend time on researching CRMs, spend time on calling people. And once you've got a semi-working, semi-repeatable sales pitch, and you have something that you can reuse, then at that stage you can start looking. I think the first one we used was Pipedrive. Then with HubSpot's special, we went over to their special for a year when you had 90% discount. But then after that year, it was too expensive to continue, so we went back to Pipedrive.
Okay.
And then we realized we needed something bigger that encompasses the marketing and something more robust. And now we're on Zoho. So there's a lot of options. I'm not promoting any one of them specifically, but I think just early days, just use an Excel until you figure out something that you can repeat. Don't spend time on that at that stage.
That was good marketing for Zara. I think if you've got a referral code, Hein, we can just add it in the comments here.
I'm sure someone in JobJack has one, but they're working nicely now.
Um, I actually have a question around founder dynamics. I mean, I think one of the key strengths of JobJack is this, dynamic between you and Christian, and both of you do different things in the business. How do you go about figuring out who does what, and how do you practically keep each other accountable and inspired and motivated? Because we're all human, right? So, things happen, life happens, all of those things. Maybe share a bit about how the two of you go about doing what you do.
I think we were very lucky. So we implement something called strength finders in the business. So that's something that really gave us good self-understanding, but also understanding of each other and the other leaders in the business. And we were lucky that I think both of us had positivity in our top 5 strengths. So keeping motivated kind of came naturally. So I can't speak too much to that. I think we were naive that we probably should have been bankrupt multiple times, and we just went on.
But naivety is a strength. That is a superpower of a young entrepreneur. You go, how hard can this be? And you dive in and go, oh crap, I need to pay salaries.
No, but naivety is 100% the strength. But yeah, I think the dynamic it for us kind of played out naturally in the sense that we naturally ended up focusing on the things in the early days that we were better at. But I think as the business grew and progressed, we needed to start having conversations about it and formalizing the focus areas better. So early days, it organically happened. Like it wasn't a conversation that much. Obviously, if you've got one tech founder and one business founder, it's easier. But Christian and myself, we both come from the same background, so we were in theory overlapping, but we ended up taking hold of things we were specifically good at. But as the business progressed, we had to start having conversations and formalizing that, this part of the business, this and this is what you will be held accountable for, this and this is what I'll be held accountable for. And it's evolving. So the more we learn about ourselves and about each other, the more clearly we can define those things.
Yeah, that's super exciting actually. And like the maturity that happens as you're growing. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to start wrapping up. Renier, do you have any last questions before we let Hein go and the quick fire round?
No.
All right, Hein. So I've just got a few quick fire questions. You have to think on top of your mind, tip of your tongue. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Are you ready? There's just a few. Won't be too bad. All right. Okay.
Let's go.
The easy one though. What book would you recommend other founders to read?
How to Win Friends and Influence People from Dale Carnegie.
Why is that?
I think it just reminds you of the basics when it comes to influencing people. And as a founder, you need to influence people. You need to get people to join the business. You need to influence clients to use your products. So I think it's crucial skills to gain.
Fantastic.
Be reminded of everything is so obvious in that book, but you forget it.
Yeah. Cool. Love it. This is one of my favorites. What advice have you received in your career as a founder, as an entrepreneur, or even before that you've held on to that you feel needs to be heard by another founder following suit?
Probably cliche, but to focus. I think it's the most powerful thing that we have had. We get 5 million new ideas every day in our personal capacity of different new other businesses we can start outside of JobJack, and then within JobJack there's a billion opportunities. So I think just realizing that you must focus on one thing at a time. It's almost, I usually use the Capitec example. Capitec focused on the bank for 10 years. They built up 10 million users, and then they activated financial products, and now they're I think the biggest policy holder in the country. Whereas if they implemented that after 3 years, it probably would have looked different. So yeah, focus.
Okay, I love that. So then I'm going to throw in one last question. You've obviously had to focus, or you've focused. If there was something that you could nip your head into, just to kill the curiosity, what would it be? What other business would you start? What other opportunity would you take or try and chase?
um, I'm very curious on township housing at the moment. I think there's a lot of value that can be unlocked. So it's just something I'm curious of, but I've got a list on Notion of business ideas, but that's something that I find interesting at the moment.
Yeah. Now, we've had some people on the podcast talking about that, and hopefully you'll have some new ones in the new year. So when you do decide to listen to podcasts, give it a listen. And I'm actually going to finish with that as my last question. If you could have a 30-minute coffee with any leader in the world, past or present, who would you love to have coffee with?
Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, which I think is relevant for us.
Yeah. Well, he'll thank you for all the engagement that you're growing on his platform.
Exactly. Yes. No. I think
Cool.
we'll have a lot of learnings to share.
Okay, brilliant. Actually, I'm going to ask you why. Why Reid Hoffman? What is it about him?
It's less about him and more about obviously the fact that he built LinkedIn, which is sometimes we describe JobJack as the LinkedIn for the entry-level market. I know it's not that. It's not the same thing, but I do think you'll actually have a lot of practical learnings you can share about building LinkedIn that will be relevant to what we are doing. They obviously also have their recruitment side of the business, so it's more of a selfish JobJack focused, focused, the
Yep.
selfish JobJack focused ask. When we with our new investors, we can have input on who joins the board on their behalf, for it to be someone who's independent.
Okay.
So we thought Reid will be a good non-executive director.
Yeah.
We hope they convince him.
Busy calling him up. All right, Hein, this was a great conversation. I really, really enjoyed it and appreciate all your feedback. Thank you very much. And we'll definitely be keeping track of what you guys are able to achieve, and look forward to hopefully having you on in the next 12 months and see how the story is going.
Great. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Renier. All of the best on your side. And thanks for having me.
Okay, nice one.